Okay. You should be recording. Is everyone notified? Opening? All right,
You've
sounds
been
good. I said go
notified.
for it.
I'm ready. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit, just a brief timeline about where we are in remedial design, what we've done in the past few years, where it's headed, and then talk through some recent big deliverables that we've put out. The big news is kind of a preliminary design that we have for the Cathedral Park area of where we think capping and dredging will need to happen to come up with a productive remedy. And so I don't have a ton of slides. We have a fair amount of time. So as we go, if you have questions, just shout them out and we'll talk through it.
And we're monitoring the chat and Danny's helping too. So feel free, however you want to express yourself, jump in. Okay.
All right, so we started in 2021. EPA decided to take on the beginning of remedial design for this area because we wanted to keep it on track with the rest of the site. And so we did our first big sampling event then in 2021, and we evaluated that data then in 2022. Around that time, we then decided to not just do the first sampling, but to take this area all the way through 100% remedial design. And so we needed a lot more data in order to do that. So we went back out in 2023 and collected a lot more data. And what we just published is the evaluation of that data. So that's the supplemental pre-design investigation evaluation report. It's very wordy, but that's what that is that Laura's pointing to. And we also started in 2023 with building our basis of design report. And that was just published as well. And so that's where we are. We've just finished those two things from, kind of the culminating the work that was done in 2024. At this point, as of this week, we're actually back out in the field to collect a little more data that will go into another report in 2025. We're also going to see the 60% design come out by the end of this year. And then in 2026, we'll use that last bit of data to feed it into a 100% design. Any questions on that? All right, next slide. So what is a basis of design report? This is a pretty common step in a lot of site work. We do a lot of data collection at first, kind of wrap our heads around what is it that we're trying to accomplish, what are the constraints we're working under for the site, and what are the requirements that our design needs to meet. And we summarize all of that in a basis of design report. What is the basis of our decisions? And then it also helps us track a path forward of what future evaluations do we need to do? Do we have the data for those evaluations? And it kind of sets us on the path to create an actual engineering design. So for the Cathedral Park BODR, we specifically, we did this report based on the 2021 data. So it's not real heavy on data, but it really set us up well for this next stage of design. We got a basic idea of where the contamination is. And so that's like a culmination of all the sampling that was done and understanding what happens with river currents and grain size and all the kind of the physical realities of the contamination in the site. We looked at what the record decision requires. It's pretty specific in what design criteria you need to meet with these designs. It's also the infrastructure at the site is important, right? And the future uses, we want to do a cleanup that aligns with what people need in the future. So for us with Cathedral Park, it's going to continue being a park. And we want it to be a great park. So that's one of our things that we're including into the design considerations. And infrastructure. So, there's some docks there. There's an outfall that comes out. There's the St. John's Bridge footing is a big piece of important infrastructure that's going to influence our design. Habitat, we looked at as part of that supplemental field work. We went and looked at the existing habitat, and part of our design will be to ensure that we build better habitat, that we bring it back better than it is now. And so how can we do that? And also maintaining the physical stability of the site. So as we go and dig out the contaminated material, we don't want to destabilize parts of the river, right? So these are all things that are in that basis of design report that then help us figure out what our preliminary design is going to be, and the preliminary design is like, hey, based on all this information we have right now, what do we think we can do? How's the design starting to shape up? Cassie?
Just curious, just on a, people level, pedestrian level, like how much do you think the habitat, increased habitat, which is exciting. I'm really grateful that you all are integrating more. How much do you think that will take away from like beach area where people tend to recreate at the park itself?
I don't think it'll take anything away. We're not looking at creating habitat only spaces in the park. And our cleanup is really, remember, from like top of bank down. So the area where our cleanup is going to intersect with the parky part is that beach. And we're not looking at turning that into solely habitat. Does that answer your question?
No.
Okay.
I'm actually looking at like percentage because, recreation is a mitigation issue. It's like, it's like there's not enough of it already. So just curious, like if the footprint of recreation, like how, if it's like 100%, which it's not, but like however, whatever percentage it is, like how much percent will be taken away for habitat. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing necessarily. I'm just curious, I think that isn't really important information for especially Portland Harbor advocates to know. Because also like NOAA hasn't even done anything yet to get the whole recreation mitigation thing going.
Through the NERDA process. Yeah.
Through the NERDA process and the fund. I just asked that not long ago of Laura Sinker, and they haven't done anything yet, which I don't understand because they got feedback on that a long time ago. So that's also a question I have, but
yeah, I think ultimately, as we look at the future use, it's one thing we learned through this group is that beach upstream of the swimming dock is also heavily recreated on. And so in all the areas where we take action, we'll remove all the piles, we'll replace it with beach space. I think it's going to be a much better place to recreate once we're done because of that pile removal.
The city has, I don't know if it's just because of the contamination, but the city has really blocked that whole area north of the dock off. So you can't even get down there accessibly at all.
I think Dawn has her hand raised. Dawn, did you want to weigh in on?
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see that. Sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. I'm just thinking that was a good segue. If like, is that separate, Dawn, or no?
So, there is a master plan for this site, and so anything that's done on the thing we'll be doing in coordination with EPA. EPA is not going to go in and make a bunch of changes without coordinating with the city, and we do have, park areas that are designated for swimming, and we'll also look for opportunities to improve what we have out there as well. So it'll be in coordination between the city and EPA, and how do we improve that for the community?
Can the community be included in those conversations as well, Dawn? Because traditionally we've been told by parks that master plan is like not even anywhere on the priority list in the future for implementation.
Well, that's what we're actually hoping, is because we haven't had the funding to fully implement the master plan, that we can use part of this process to get closer to the master plan. So we're hoping to actually be able to use this to meet some of the things that we wanted in the master plan.
Okay, and it's so old that it needs a little more community input, like current context. So let's follow up on that.
Yeah, and that's really kind of a parks thing, but I'm sticking my nose into their stuff, but that's okay. and I think there will also be opportunities, because these will be rolled out as part of the designs for this, and we'll be talking about what our concepts are.
Yeah, and there is, because of the way we're doing it, we've got these preliminary design drawings as part of the BODR, but we're going to put out the 60% design and take informal feedback at that point once it's a little bit more defined, and it'll give you something to really react to. So Dawn's right, there'll be an opportunity through this design process as well to weigh in.
Yeah, and just to flag for the RAG and Cassie and everyone. And Josie, while I'm saying this, if you want to like review Micah's comment in the chat to state verbally in a second, that for the Cathedral Park project area, yeah, Josie mentioned that 60% we anticipate will be ready this fall, most likely. And so that's actually, Emil, Laura, for you both in particular, we're thinking that would be a good time for Marcus to look at that, for that informal community feedback point. And the technical coordinating team for Portland Harbor would be seeing it then too. And then this work group we were thinking could convene probably around that time, so we could give an overview of it while he's reviewing it with all of you. Thanks, Cassie, for bringing that up, and Don, thank you. Josie, Micah's question is, yeah, my understanding is that all the habitat work in the BODR is in water. Is that correct?
Yeah, if we think of in water as the place that sometimes is in the dry, right? That and it's, I gotta also admit, it's real early, Micah. So we haven't, we're still just looking at our overall habitat evaluation, and we'll compare that to our future design and go through a process to, the Clean Water Act requires that we mitigate for any damage to the environment that's done as part of the cleanup. And so that gives us a buffer to make it better. And so we'll look at habitat improvements we can do to the site in order to offset the impacts of conducting the cleanup itself. So I don't think we're going to limit ourselves just to in water for that. So
thank you.
All right, next slide. So this is a figure out of the basis of design report, just looking at where we know the contamination to be. And these different colors are the different contaminants of concern. So for example, the yellow hatching is where there's PCBs that exceed our action levels. Right? So in this nearshore area, any place where there's PCBs above 75 parts per billion, we're going to go take an active action. And that's where this, that's what this is showing. And so then anything that's colored in this figure is at this stage in the design is targeted for active cleanup. And then through our subsequent sampling efforts, we've done a little bit more to reduce some uncertainty in these areas and to make sure that we really have gotten the edges of the contamination. And so one thing that I think is interesting to see here is that the contamination is pretty much offshore of that beach area, except for down by the boat ramp. And then there is that area right under the bridge where we got a hit for PCBs down between 2 and 3 feet in the sand. And so if you want to go to the next slide, Laura, it just shows where we went back and took extra samples to do a better job of defining where that contamination ends. And so this is showing some of the results from the 2023 data. And so if we look at that top right, we got an exceedance in the riverbank up there. In Riverbank 10, it's very small, but then we went and put sediment samples all around there to understand where that contamination ends. And you can see the white ones like RB39, RB40 shows where there wasn't contamination in those samples, but the other way, RB39, there was still. And so this helps us really target the areas of sediment contamination for our cleanup. And then likewise, it flung the other way sometimes too. So down SC206, which is right in the center there, the arrow is pointing to it. That's an area where we were hoping to delineate the extent of contamination, and we found more contamination there. So that's one of the areas that we're going to go back out and sample again this year to find the edge of the contamination. So you'll see these lines will shift a little bit as we go through design, but generally we feel like we know where the contamination is enough to really start our design work.
And that sampling is going to be occurring pretty soon, right?
Yeah, they mobilized this week. They're starting on Monday with the boat and the coring.
So you all may see some activity out there. And you
That's
might,
true.
I know Sarah Taylor's in here, but I'll let her know because I know she usually does walks and things too. But if feel free to let folks know that that's what they're seeing.
All right, next slide. Oh, here's what you've been waiting for, Doug. So this is our preliminary design, so the technologies in the record of decision are dredging and capping. And what you can see here, this is the upstream area. So you're looking at an engineering drawing of the area. You can see the BES lab there in the center. And then it goes out into the river. And over to your left is the St. John's Bridge footing. So, and then the swimming dock is also shown in this figure. The areas that are shaded gray are the areas with sediment that needs to be actively remediated. The good news in this area is that the contamination is mostly between 1 and 3 feet deep. And so that means for the most part, we're going to be able to remove it. So we'll just go in and dredge it. In the areas that are closer to shore, where you can see those diagonal lines, those are areas where we'll then backfill to grade, most likely with sand. So Deb, we don't actually need a containment cap in those areas. It'll just be clean material. There are a couple places with the full hatch marking where it's not shaded with hatch marking. And those are areas where, because of infrastructure, we're not going to be able to dredge. So we're not going to dredge right around the bridge footing because we don't want to destabilize it. And we're not going to dredge. There's an important pipe that goes through that area of the river that we also don't want to damage with dredging. So we'll cap over that area.
I see. And I think Doug were you saying something? And then we can go to, or no, I think you're on mute. So if you want to unmute, then we can go to Cassie. Okay, so
are you going to have to remove the dock to dredge? It's a floating dock. You might just dredge under it.
We'll put it off to the side so we don't destroy it and dredge, and then we'll put it back.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Cassie,
is there such a clean line between like contaminated sediment and the beach because that was all filled in with clean soil at one point in time? Like,
yeah, so they did on the riverbank of the BES lab, they went back and did a remediation of that site. They did remediate the whole site, but the riverbank remedy, they Dawn, you probably can speak to it more than I can. I believe they laid it back, put some geofabric down and rocked it. It's got those large rocks on it. And I think because the contamination, so that happened. And also just when we did our coring at the top of that beach, we didn't find contamination. So we were able to delineate it as not going under that riverbank.
No, see, I know I read the BODR, but I had another question, and I don't think I noticed in the BODR. Have you looked at the stability of that bank if you're going to be dredging right next to the
contamination that is there's it doesn't go right up to the toe of the bank, and
Mhm.
it's like a foot deep in the near shore zone. The stuff that goes down to 3 feet deep is for this. So it's just not much. So yeah, so we're not, I mean, our geotech engineers are looking at that. We took some geotech samples in that area for that purpose, but I'd be surprised if it was going to cause a problem because it's just, taking a foot out happens with a storm. So any other questions? The other thing to note, so see all those little red dots in there? That's where there's pilings right now. So all those pilings that are in our dredge area will get removed to the extent that we can get them out.
Are there ones that are outside? Well, yeah, there are some that are outside the dredge area, but in between, can you remove those as well?
Not, we don't need to do it for the cleanup. That is one of the ways we could maybe get some credits for the damage that the cleanup will do is to remove extra piles.
Okay.
Yeah.
If memory serves me right, when they did a beach cleanup a year or two ago, they sawed a lot of the pilings off just below the sediment line.
Mm-hmm.
Does that create problems for dredging?
No, they actually were careful to only do that in areas where we're not going to go take an active cleanup.
Okay.
So I think they got some of the ones right here. And when we go downstream, you can see more of the area where they got it out. And just the other thing to mention before I go to your question, Cassie, There is some deeper contamination over by the swimming dock where it's not in the top 1 to 3 feet. And we're trying to get to the bottom of that this summer. That's one of the things we're trying to figure out is how deep does that contamination go? And so we might end up with a cap in that area if the contamination is just deeper than we can feasibly get out with a dredge. Cassie.
Community is hungry to do some experimental, testing or like cleanup. Like have some carved out area where they or we can do, try something out. And we are, I think, wanting to know if like EPA would be open to dedicating a little area to try something out. Happy to like talk to you about those options, but what we're into. But
I'm intrigued by what you mean. Yeah, let's talk later.
Okay. Thank you.
Ultimately, like EPA is not planning to be the one that implements this cleanup, and we are not a landowner. So,
but we would want to
sure what you have in mind
in the design, like we would want to have some language in the design, to ensure that can happen.
Let's talk about it. You can tell me more what you're thinking about.
Well said. I can reach out to you, Cassie. We'll coordinate something with that.
Thank you.
All right, let's go down river to the other half of the Cathedral Park to see the plan down there. So this is to the, in the center of the screen, and very faintly, you can see the current boat ramp is there. And then it goes all the way over into the green anchors. This figure shows all the way over into green anchors. And so this is, again, and the contamination over is a little bit deeper. It's 3 to 5 feet, but still totally dredgeable. And so that's our intent there, is to dredge that out, and then in the near shore zone to backfill it to grade. There is an outfall. See that little cyan dot there is an outfall that we need to figure out. Either everything we do is going to be on top of it and it'll be okay, or we're going to need to remove it and replace it as part of that cleanup. And this is an area where you can see all those little black pilings in there that will be removed as part of the remedy.
What are the parallel skinny rectangles to the left of the cyan dot?
The parallel skinny, that's to show where the areas that's going to be backfilled to grade.
Those long ones? Oh, that's the grade.
Stripes. Yeah.
Okay. And the
so in the shallow water, we're backfilling to grade to maintain that shallow water habitat, and then in the deeper water, we'll dredge, and then we'll put down a residual management layer, but we won't backfill it all the way up to its current bathymetry.
What is the cyan, Josie?
It's an outfall. It's outfall 52.
Oh, okay.
I was surprised there was less contamination outside the outfall than there appears to be.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, so where it just stops, that's at the navigation channel boundary. So also our threshold for cleanup jumps at that line. That makes sense. Micah? Yeah. Oh, an outfall is where stormwater comes out. So that's a, it's a stormwater outfall. And this is one that it used to just outfall on the beach, but I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years ago, the city buried it. So it that outfalls deeper into the river.
My understanding is it's also an overflow outfall.
It is.
Don would know about that.
It is. I think it very rarely gets used for that anymore. But yeah, it is still one of the outfalls.
And that's one of the reasons why we put it's one of the reasons why we put it away from the beach, in case, on rare occasions, it's not going to go onto the beach.
It's why the city gets real squirrely when we talk about doing anything with it.
Yeah. So I have a question about the Green Acres dock. Are you going to have to moor the current boats elsewhere during the dredging?
Yeah, we're still figuring out. So this one that you can see in this figure here is the walking pier that goes out to the Love Boat. And
Yeah.
then the larger Whirly Crane pier is out of the picture. And we'll work with them on, yeah, how to remore things, or, if it makes sense. We're also looking into, for the walking pier, whether it makes sense to remove it and replace it. And dolphins are pretty easy to remove and replace. So that's part of, this is preliminary. And so we're figuring out those things coming into the 60% design.
Okay. And then the second question is, for the mitigation that EPA may be required to do for habitat improvements, can that happen? Like, what's the furthest extent that could happen within this stretch? Like, does it have to be parallel to the impacted area where where the infraction incurs?
The strong preference in the record of decision is to do the mitigation within the site itself.
Okay.
And so most designs, like for our design, what we will attempt to do is, remember that project area we saw from the beginning that goes all the way down from the Toyota storage yard all the way up to in front of the BES lab?
Yeah.
Our goal will be to have that design as a whole meet our requirements for mitigation within that project area, but it doesn't have to be close or temporal or geographically.
So to get to, I think this could be responsive to Cassie's concern about any habitat restoration sort of negatively impacting recreation opportunities, that if there was an opportunity to do restoration at, let's say, Green Acres, where there is existing canopy and not a lot of access on the water, so there could be more in-water work done there.
Yeah, and also that riverbank further downstream from Green Acres, what was the old Markham North, that is something we've got our eye on.
Because it's got that.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? Yeah, it's kind of a natural fit.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm so mad I missed the presentation. I will look it online.
Hi, Zora. Here, I'll give you the good news is, for the most part, the contamination is pretty shallow, and we're gonna dredge it all out in front of Cathedral Park, with some key exceptions. All right, what's my next slide, Laura? Oh yeah, just kind of where we're going from here. So let's go back for 1 second. Any other questions on the preliminary design? Okay, next slide. So what we're doing from here, as I mentioned, we're doing a lot of the habitat work is going to come in as part of the 60% design of how we make the design what we call self-mitigating. We're also looking at how to design the caps. So in the places where we do need to do some caps, and this is going to happen in front of Crawford Street, definitely needs a cap. And then around some of the infrastructure in Cathedral Park, what kind of chemical isolation layer do we need to effectively contain the contamination that's below it? And so typically this is a mix of sand and activated carbon in a certain percentage and a certain thickness. And there's models that we run to understand how the contamination might move into the cap and be contained by the cap. And we also need to look at erosion protection for the cap based on the flows that we expect to see and the vessel traffic, to make sure that whatever we put down stays in place.
Is this part of the river depositional or erosion?
It's neutral. So it bounces around a little bit, but overall it's generally neutral, which I think is why you see this contamination being close to the surface. It hasn't gotten buried over the years.
That makes it easy.
It does. Yeah, it's a blessing. And we're also looking at all of the geotech data we have to actually design those cut prisms for the dredge area, right? We need to make sure that they're stable when we go to dig this sediment out. And so that's a kind of mixture of looking at where the contamination is, what slopes it's on, and what the geotechnical stability of the material itself is, so that we design a dredge prism that's safe. So that's some of the stuff.
When you say geotechnical stability, what do you mean?
It's where, when you look at the material from a strength perspective, like how much can we compact it? How much will it slough off? You know how, like, when you go to dig in the beach and the walls fall in a little bit to kind of a standard slope. That slope is dependent on the material itself. So depending on it, some slopes need to be much gentler to be stable, and some material can hold a much stiffer slope on its own. All right, I'm ready for the next slide. Both the basis of design report that I've been talking about, and the supplemental pre-design investigation report are available online. Those are the links to those.
Danny, if you could put those in the chat for folks. They are in the slide deck too, if you want to go through them.
Can get it so many ways. All right, and next slide. Wrap up. I think Laura, you're best suited to do the wrap up.
Wrap up really fast, sorry. Well, we can also pause for just any other questions. We have about 9 minutes. But I will just say for Zora too, since I know you came on later, but we recorded Josie's full presentation, so don't worry. But in the beginning, Josie was talking about how the next deliverable for this area or document, we call them deliverables, is the 60% design. And so that should be ready for review in the fall. Exact timing, a little bit unclear, so we'll keep you all updated. But Josie, did you want to, weigh in?
I think I'm going to see the first draft of it in the fall. So I think that's why we were thinking that maybe in early 2026 would be the right time for this group to see it.
Right. Well, I think you and I were talking though that possibly this fall rate is when the RAG and Marcus would want to be looking at it, and maybe so that would be an informal community feedback point is when we have that, and that is when the technical advisor for the Lone River Advocacy Group, we'd suggest to the RAG that would be a good time for Marcus to be reviewing that, and could, if you all are interested, I'm assuming you would be, we could have another meeting, this fall once that Marcus has had a chance to kind of look at it and could kind of go through it a little bit more and see what initial questions he has to help inform community feedback. So that's the main next step. But also next step I recorded was to follow up with Cassie and Josie on a discussion about possibly, seeing if there's any kind of community collaboration, what ideas there are on kind of doing some kind of experiment. I'm not sure if that would be possible or not, but good to talk about. But let's go. There was a couple questions too. So Micah, you were first, and then we'll go to Zora.
I think I may have missed this, but so in that timeline, when would the general public have an opportunity to comment on the plan?
That's this fall. It would be this. So what we've been doing with each project area in Cathedral Park is no different, but we've actually gone above and beyond because 2021, back on that slide, the RAG actually already did look at the initial sampling plan for that 2021 sampling effort that we were talking about and gave feedback. So now but that was that was early on before we, kind of were at this stage. So now that we're kind of in the throes of more detailed design this fall, right when that 60% comes in.
I think you keep saying fall, and it's making me very nervous. We're looking at November or December, not September.
Well, I consider November fall. Okay, fine.
I know you do. I'm reacting to it. I'm like the project manager, and he's like, oh,
fall, winter. Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. No, sorry. I should have said fall, winter, because it is, and that's why the timing changes things, Josie. The timing does change with these project areas. That's kind of been the case for all of them. But what we've been doing is for each project area in Cathedral Park, it will be no different. And we're leading, it. So it'll be, anyway. So that will be the next check-in. And so they're, though, just really high level for folks, and Emil and Laura know, but we'll be giving, right, the 60% design at the same time to, you know, to the RAG. We would give it to them at the same time as we do to the technical coordinating team for Portland Harbor, for review. And so the RAG really is the one who's helping coordinate community feedback, but then they collectively give us feedback on behalf of community. So that's what we've been doing. And what we would do and have been doing is letting Marcus and the RAG and community members via the RAG take a look at it for a bit. And then we give usually a presentation, or if it's a project area where EPA, you know, and other parties are leading the work, like this has happened over Mall 11 East, Willamette Cove, those parties have given a presentation. But in this case, since we're leading the work, we'll be doing that. Does that help, Micah? Okay. Zora and then Laura.
Yeah, Josie, I like your project management concerns. The timeline is always important. Obviously, I will, Josie, I will follow up with a couple of things because I went to the presentation and had some questions, because I honestly have to say that when I heard Cathedral Park, I focused more on Cathedral Park, but I'm much more interested around green anchors and the BS side, because obviously green anchors were, you know, we are there and we're bringing a lot of people out on boats. And then also BS side where a lot of people are living. And the other part of that is by December 1st, our mayor wants to have everybody inside, which I believe it when I see it. But so there is a lot of questions around involvement there. And again, my question will be, is there any other surveys, sampling, anything else happening in the design period? So you're going to be out, anybody be out there? Because then I would love to be connected. And I work also with Barbie, who is not doing some checkups out there. But the situation here is really bad right now. They're doing daily sweeps and people are in a very desperate state. So I would highly recommend not to have a government person go by themselves out there.
Okay, that's good to know. And is this down by Lindbergh Beach as well, or just in front of the BES lab?
It's probably all the way down, but it's like they just had a sweep, so I'm not sure where people are moving. But I know people are moving north of Green Anchors now too.
Okay.
So it's because there's nowhere else to go, and they blocked everything else off with boulders.
Okay. Yeah, Zora, maybe you and Laura and I can get on a call with the video screen, and I can show you what kind of the preliminary design plan is for in front of Green Acres, and we can look at what the sampling that we're doing in the next couple months. We're out there starting next week.
Perfect. And have you worked with Green Anchors on, or you know, in any kind of outreach so far?
Yeah, I mean, we always tell them what we're doing. It's part of our access agreement with them.
Is that the owners or the
With
community?
Matt Stein is the person who we coordinate with.
Okay, I will have a chat with Matt, because I don't think it goes to any of the you know, people actually working there, and they might have some ideas and feedback as well. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Matt is on this working group too, so he got the emails and he has attended in the past, but it wasn't able to tonight. So, but Zora, that would be awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. And I'll schedule something with us later so we can go through that. That's
Perfect.
super helpful.
Thank you.
Laura.
Yeah, a little bit connected to what Zora was saying. So the construction, the cleanup actually begins like what, 2027 or, okay. So this keeps coming up in my mind. How are we alerting the public around this, especially since people are being urged to swim at Cathedral Park? It seems like now is the time to start planning for public outreach in terms of safety during the cleanup process. And not just public input, but general public information about, you know, the process and what they can and can't do during this time. And maybe it's already in the works, I don't know. But I mean, this is true for the entire cleanup, but I'm wondering how that's gonna look.
Yeah, it's gonna, we're negotiating right now with folks who are going to actually be conducting the cleanup. And so part of the agreement they will come to, part of what they'll have to agree to do is to do some of that outreach work. And we will work with them and with the city and the state to help guide that. But it is part of the folks who will do remedial action. It's incumbent on them to do that work. And so until we have an agreement with those people, it's premature to do some of that work.
Okay.
But we have thought
And
about
the community impacts mitigation plan.
I
is
was
where
just
that-
thinking the
Yes.
SIMP.
That's
That's it.
exactly.
So it's in there with expectations around outreach. And so that's what we'll expect those folks, once they come to an agreement to do remedial action, we'll expect them to read the SIMP to help guide their actions.
Okay.
And our SIMP implementation committee will also have a voice in that and some visibility into what's happening and an ability to give feedback and hopefully improve outreach systems.
Thank you.
Who will be responsible for the contract when the actual cleanup starts?
Whoever signs up to do the cleanup will
So
do
would
that.
that be the city or?
It's whoever signs up to do the cleanup work. So like right now, there's a number of parties that are under administrative orders with EPA to do the design work. And the next stage is to put a consent decree in place where folks agree to do the cleanup work. And then whoever signs up to EPA and says, okay, we're gonna agree to do the cleanup work, they then will go hire a contractor or
Okay.
many contractors.
Well, if it's the city or state or a public entity or even the port, we obviously want to negotiate a community benefits agreement with those parties prior to consent decree being finalized so that the RFP process can be informed by the terms of that community benefits agreement. And that goes out to contractors to conduct the cleanup. So if anyone's listening right now that might be a potential performing party, let's get those conversations going again really soon, because we had been having those conversations years ago, and then those dropped off for many years. So Dawn, maybe we can also follow up about that, and Miranda and others.
Yeah, I think part of the challenge is that we just don't know what work is going to be done by whom at this point.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think we can work around that too, because we had already had that type of conversation about, we can have multiple scenarios that we lay out in an MOU ahead of time leading up to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. These are such good questions. And it's so good to see all of you. Any other questions? I know we're a few minutes past 7, so if anyone needs to leave, please feel free. But any last questions before we let you all? Laura, you look questiony.
Me?
No?
No.
Okay.
So good to see you all.
Yeah, you too. Thanks everybody for making the time to learn about
Yeah.
this. And feel free to follow up with any questions that come up later.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Laura. Have